I'm sure married life shouldn't be this difficult, but marriage to Joanna, Joe, was more difficult than I could have imagined. The nagging and complaining just seemed endless. Everything I did was wrong. Before we started dating, I had many hobbies, mostly outdoor activities and sports, as well as cycling and playing soccer. As the years went by, it all came to naught, with Joe saying we couldn't afford it, that we didn't have time, or that she had booked something else for the same day. I was losing touch with more and more friends, not participating in trips and activities. I was so infatuated with Joe that it took me years to realize what was going on, and it wasn't until I looked back after a few beers that I realized how much I had lost. Why marry someone if they are so perfect, and then try to change them? Even my friends and family became the problem. Not educated enough, drinking too much, or too loud and rude for Joe's sensibilities. She seemed to pride herself on her ability to control our lives and everything in them. There was no end to it. Earn more, work even harder, make task lists. It all became a habit for her. When we first started dating, she was caring, attentive, and quite malleable. There were a few hints of being overly demanding, but nothing that would cause alarm, and I was fascinated by her. Joanna Farrington Hall, maiden name Farrington, there was no way she was going to give up her maiden name, was a stunning woman from a wealthy family. I'm Phil Hall. Of course, I'm not stunning and I'm not that rich, but I've done pretty well for myself. Decent job and income, lots of friends and hobbies, life was good. And then I met Joe, and things got even better. Joe is tall, 5'7", with long, straight blonde hair, pale skin, and a graceful English appearance. Her blue eyes seem as lively as her personality, always running around but with a keen gaze. She's smart, determined, and well aware that she has an influence on most of the male gender, but knows how to deflect unwanted attention. No one was more shocked than me when she asked me out. I just couldn't understand it. She is clearly out of my league, and I told her so. I'm sick of all these rich, arrogant assholes messing with my head. You seem different, maybe kinder, and I see you smiling and joking around with your friends a lot. I like that. Next time you'll tell me I'm a nice guy, which is not a good reason to date. She laughed, and I was all over her. That smile and eye contact. There was no way I could resist her, and she knew it. I was literally out of breath. I had to concentrate on my breathing, and it felt like my heart was about to jump out of my chest. Despite my doubts and the fact that it was very early in the day, I was beginning to think it might work out. Joe was genuinely pleasant company and also very attractive. She worked hard on her appearance, dressed in designer outfits, used the services of a personal trainer, visited spas and beauty treatments. In general, she spared no expense. And it worked. She continues to look even better at an advanced age. Our engagement was going smoothly until an incident happened with an old family friend and her ex, Richard Askew. I caught Joe meeting him for a drink. They looked like pretty close friends, and he was holding her hands over the table. I was about to leave, but then I thought, screw it, and walked over, dropping into the chair next to them. Well, that's nice. Joe's eyes widened, and she took her hands off the table. It's not what you think. I was explaining to Richard that we're engaged now and I can't go out with him again. In fact, the only thing that confuses me then is the fact that we're holding hands in those loving eyes. Maybe it's just bad timing and you didn't get a chance to dump me first. No, I swear, Richard is just a friend now. I needed to explain everything in person, to do the right thing. I love you and I want to marry you. I looked at Richard. What can you say for yourself? He seemed in no hurry to answer, the self-righteous bastard. Joanna is quite right. I asked her out without knowing she was engaged, and I'm glad she thinks highly enough of me to explain in person. I don't want to come between you two. The words made sense, but something I didn't like about him, so he continued. I think I'd better leave you two to work out your differences. Frankly, I wish you both the best. Also, Phil, you've had a 1 in a million chance. You're a very lucky guy. Joe looked at me. I'm sorry. I should have told you I was seeing him. Are you telling me the truth, Joe? If it's not me you want, it's better to sort things out now. You're all I need, please. You have nothing to worry about. I'm all yours. Joe seemed determined to make it up to me in the bedroom, and I wasn't going to complain. I even embellished my worries a bit because I liked the way she made it up to me. The wedding was a week away, and I was starting to get tired of being lucky indeed. Only my mom seemed to think I was a pretty good deal for Joe, too. It wasn't so much the remarks themselves that bothered me, but the fact that Joe seemed to take a liking to them. I was hoping to get at least some defense or encouragement, maybe a hint that she was lucky too, or that I was a great guy, but it didn't come. Our conversations became more and more one-sided and more focused on her. At first, I wrote it off to the stress of the wedding. However, much of it was stressful for me as well. My initial proposal for a small celebration with close friends was rejected out of hand. The wedding was beyond our original plans and budget, but it had to have the perfect dress, the perfect venue, and the cake, and the ring. And her third cousins had to be added to the guest list, which at that point totaled almost 270 people. I seemed to get lost in the mishmash. I was frequently briefed but usually ignored. I wondered if it would be noticeable if I simply didn't show up, and pondered again why she was marrying me. Despite my misgivings, I did show up, and the wedding went just fine right down to the speeches. Her father's speech was more of a lecture to me about how I should support my princess in the way she was used to. Her mom was smiling at that, but I wasn't. Now that was a welcome to the family speech I wasn't expecting. Joe noticed the look on my face and stood next to me. And I'd like to drink to our two wonderful families being united by the love that Phil and I share. She cast an annihilating glare at her father, sitting back down. At least I wasn't the only one who felt disapproval. The rest of the day passed without incident. After a tumultuous honeymoon, we embarked on married life, and 18 months later, our first and, as it turned out, only daughter Jade was born. She was an absolute miracle to me. Joe struggled with postpartum depression and was determined that she would never go through the trauma of childbirth again. As a result, she declared that Jade would be our only offspring. Joe knew that I had always wanted more children, but I decided not to have that conversation since she wasn't handling motherhood too well. I did the best I could, taking on most of the care. When Jade turned 8, Joe wanted to go back to work. Her father was well-connected and got her a job fundraising for a charity organization. Only later did I learn that the executive director of that charity was Richard Askew. She had been working there for over a year when I was invited, along with other partners and families, to a summer social event. This year it focused on medieval events with games and activities to raise money for the charity. Most were dressed in masquerade costumes, the most popular being knights and mistresses of the manor. To Joe's disappointment, I ducked out. She bought a mistress of the manor outfit with an embroidered tunic, velvet headdress, bowler, and silk veil. There were all sorts of games, mock hand-to-hand combat with fake weapons and electronic gauges, knocking each other off logs over water, and archery competitions. The mock fencing tournament was won by Richard. Only 4 people could ride well enough to compete. They used foam spears, which were quite weighty nonetheless, and managed to land a few blows on the electronic shield sensors. One guy even managed to get thrown off his horse, though it looked like he would have fallen anyway. Truth be told, it was all amusing and fun. Then, in front of everyone, Richard rode up to Joe and asked her for a little souvenir. She took off her veil and tied it to his spear, receiving a round of applause. After that, the flirting began before my eyes. I was unhappy that Joe was spending a lot of time with her boss, so I pulled her back. "What the hell are you up to?" She laughed. "I don't know, the young knight has won my favor." "That's not funny, Joe. Come on, Phil. Aren't you going to fight for your damsel in distress? Save her from a young scoundrel with a bad reputation?" "I don't have to do that, and you don't look upset at all. On the contrary, you're enjoying it. We're married, and I thought we were devoted to each other." "Relax, it's just a joke." "Really? You jumped on each other, and it makes me wonder what else you can do at work." With those words I left, and if I hoped she would follow me, I was sorely mistaken. I walked out of the hall with no idea where to go. When in doubt, find a pub, and I spotted one called the Farmer's Rest and decided it was a good fit. I sat at the bar, still angry, drinking my first pint, By the second, I thought my reaction was perhaps a little over the top, but that was because it was him, Richard Askew, always staying in the background. I tried to think through what I should say to Joe when I got home, but as it turned out, I needn't have worried. Joe wasn't there. It was scary to think where she might be, but all my text messages went unanswered. She returned after midnight, but didn't speak to me. I was determined not to ask where she was. The next day, we only mumbled something to each other at lunch as a greeting. In the evening, Joe announced that we needed to talk, and I laughed. "Why are you laughing?" "No reason. I've just heard those 4 words a few times before in some stories." Joe ignored my words and continued. "No one, including you, has the right to control me. I'll admit that since we started working together, I've grown close to Richard again." I don't know what I expected, but certainly not this. "You slept with him?" "Don't be so rude. We have a history together. He's always had a thing for me." "So, you slept with him already?" "Stop saying that. I have to be honest and say that the attraction is mutual." "Have you slept with him yet?" "You're such a baby." I stared at her in silence, incredulous. "You dumped me at a charity event. He was there for me when you weren't. Oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. If you hadn't run away, this never would have happened." "Oh, I doubt that, Joe. I think the leg spreading was inevitable for him. One fight and you jump into bed with him, and you have the nerve to accuse me of making you a whore." "I'm not a whore." "Then what's the matter? Is it love? Are you leaving me for him?" "No, of course not. I love you." "What is it then? A one-time mistake. You feel guilty. It doesn't mean anything. You only love me, it's just sex. What kind of nonsense excuse are you making?" "Don't react like that. It was a mistake. We had a fight and I was upset. I'm sorry, okay?" "No, it's not okay. And you managed to get yourself into that situation quite well enough to justify yourself. So why tell me now?" "I wanted to be honest and see if we couldn't work things out." "It sounds to me more like you wanted to spit it out in my face. You're right about working things out. Divorce for starters." "You can't divorce me. You have no proof of cheating, no video, no tapes, no pictures." "What makes you think I need them? In this country, when people don't want to be married, they can just get a divorce. It can even be done online without lawyers. You don't have to prove who slept with who. There is no difference. I don't even know if there are investigators here. On the other hand, we also don't have attachment alienation lawsuits in this country, which is a good thing too. Otherwise, your precious charity could go bankrupt, and then what would the poor animals do? Not to mention Richard and his big paycheck. We're not getting divorced over this. Because of this episode. Don't even think about it if you want to see Jade again. Our family has more than enough money to screw you around. I looked at the aftermath of the divorce. It was a nightmare. Even if I won joint custody, I would be left with no money at all and living in a box with hopefully real walls. How wrong I was about lawyers. Before I knew it, her father's firm had already sent us for a consultation. What is this? Nowadays, people can't make a decision without the help of either a consultant or a lawyer or both. Forget about thinking for yourself. One more thing. Why is it up to me to move out, since you were the one having an affair? It wasn't an affair, and I need time to find myself and figure out what I want. Find yourself, really? I thought the problem was Richard caught you with your legs spread. That doesn't help, Mr. Hall. Dr. Taylor allowed herself a slight frown on her usually unwavering face. Joe cut into the pause in the conversation. That's not the point. I want you, but I don't know if you can handle it. I'm not okay with apologizing for the next 40 years. Have you apologized? I mean, I've heard the word sorry, but not once have you said it convincingly. Oh, grow up, I apologized, and we have to move on. To me, there was no remorse or acknowledgement of the consequences. You can't see beyond yourself. If you have any regrets, it's for yourself, for failing to live up to your own standards, for Joanna Farrington Hall being a cheater. You don't care about me other than dictating terms for us to stay together. You just want to play the victim because I hurt your pride. Maybe that's true. Your cheating definitely hurt me, pride and all. But more than that, I can't accept that the one who should care about me more than anyone else doesn't really care that much. For God's sake, it was just one time, just sex that meant nothing. I was mad at you. Fine. You left us for something meaningless. That's even worse. And I don't know if it was one time, you could have slept with him for months. How dare you? If you can't trust me, then we're done, and we can call it a day. Actually, that's a good idea. A very good idea. It's the first thing you've said that makes sense. What? Can't you be serious? I got up and walked out. What are you doing? Don't you dare walk away from me! It's still a matter of control for you, isn't it? Well, you don't control me. I'm free to leave this room, and I'm free to walk away from you. Phil, don't you dare leave. Phil. I was waiting for a call from Dr. Taylor after I didn't show up for my next appointment. Mr. Hall, I'm checking in on our session today. I'm not coming, Dr. Taylor. That's what I thought. Mr. Hall, Phil, strictly off the record, there are certain traits in your wife's personality that you should be careful about. You mean other than infidelity? She has some narcissistic traits. She'll never forgive you for what she's done. Nothing you do will be right. Beware of parental alienation. It's worth reading about. At this point, the conversation ended abruptly. I got busy reading. What I discovered horrified me. The traits described seemed to fit Jo, especially her sense of self-worth and superiority. Her lack of empathy, need for attention, criticism of others, and non-acceptance of negative feedback all struck me. I realized for the first time that I could lose Jade completely. Parental alienation describes the psychological manipulation of a child against the other parent. In essence, Jade could be brainwashed and isolated from me, and that was not an option. The long-term effects on the child and some of the case studies are heartbreaking. Legally and financially, I would lose. None of the breakup and revenge ideas looked viable in the cold light of day. I am not an ex-soldier, an IT expert, or have friends in the lower strata of society. I am an ordinary person at the mercy of the courts and the system. Is there any way I can avoid losing everything? And then I had an epiphany. Well, not really an epiphany, but a vague idea that I could stay with Jo and raise Jade together. She's almost 10 now, so I need another 6 years. I don't need to be in love with Jo, and in my opinion, I no longer need to be faithful to her. So it might be a marriage of convenience. Financially, I'll be much better off. Just need to remain on friendly terms for a few years, and I'll eliminate the possibility of losing Jade. After Dr. Taylor's warning, I did worry about what might happen if I wasn't around. Jo begged me to give her one last chance to explain, but I refused, unless she promised to stop preventing my access to Jade after moving in with my mom. She refused to do that, and insisted that there would be no access issues, and as a result, I reluctantly went to our old house. Let's just sit down and clear the air. The truth is, I've always wanted something more, and if it hadn't been for Richard, it would have been someone else sooner or later. Why did you have to marry me? It's obvious I love you. Idiot. Because of you, I'm happy, safe, and content. I get along with people. I have a lot of energy, and I love attention. I need you, but I need something else, too. And what you need is Richard Askew. Not necessarily. He's not bad in bed, but I can dump him if that's what's bothering you. I know you don't like him. Of course, if you dump me, in less than 30 minutes he'll be here. He's always been in love with me. Wow, now you've shown yourself in all your glory, so ruthless. Maybe you do deserve each other. This doesn't have to be our end. Look at me. You won't find anyone better than me, and I will take care of your every need. But you want to have fun with other guys? There's no need to be so blunt. Hanging out with Richard has reminded me exactly what I'm missing. I'd like to be more open with you, but I'm afraid of losing you. It doesn't have to happen often, and I can be restrained. We were both silent for a long time, the aftermath of the divorce making me think about them. I can come back if we open up our relationship? Jo hadn't expected such a comment and looked shocked, but then a smile appeared on her face. That's fine, baby. I can be your hot wife if you want to get involved. You can watch, or I can tell you all about it. Maybe that will help you understand. That's not really what I meant. I don't want to hear about what you're doing. I'd like to swap with other couples. Why would you do that when you have me? Maybe it's my innate sense of fairness. But on the other hand, it would give you the extra sex you seem to crave. She looked down at her body, spreading her thighs slightly in her tight skirt. But baby, I don't want to share you. You don't need anything but this. I knew I needed to appeal to the part of her that craved worship. Just imagine all those studs you could enjoy yourself with. They'd be desperate to sleep with a beauty like you. You'd be the center of attention, and they'd do whatever you wanted. I realized that she liked that thought even more than her desire to control me, so I continued with my Hail Mary last chance plan. It's the only way we can stay together, and there are a few more conditions. You will have to pass a disease test before I touch you again, and any hookups will be strictly condom use. No non-consensual play, and to find other like-minded couples, we'll join the site. One more thing. Dump Richard and never date him again. You're right, I can't stand that little shit. Joe rejected the idea and made a fuss, at one point even accusing me of trying to cheat. I barely suppressed a laugh, knowing she just didn't get the irony, and asked if she'd already tendered her resignation. It's not a negotiation, Joe. It's either that or I just quit. Joe reluctantly agreed. She could see how adamant I was, but no doubt thought she'd find some way around me sooner or later. Besides, she quit, saying that Dad had found her another position and swore that she would never see Richard again. I wasn't naive enough to believe her completely, but it's a concession I expected more resistance from. I registered on several swinger sites and was amazed at the number of responses. The photo of Joe in an elegant evening gown was attracting attention from all ages more than the semi-nude photos in other profiles. We moved on to correspond with several couples online. The first couple we actually met was Dave and Gail. The meeting was okay. They were a little younger than us, very fit and attractive. Dave was very interested in Joe, but I didn't like Gail, and we dismissed the meeting as an interesting evening, much to Joe's disappointment. At one point, we exchanged brief kisses. Joe seemed flustered when I kissed Gail, although her kiss with David was longer and more engaging. After that, I matched couples based on my wife's profile. I wasn't too worried about what Joe would get. Honestly, most of them were on par with their partners, but not always. Every month or so, we met up with other couples, not always for sex. As a rule, the men were wonderful and their wives were very attractive. The ages ranged from 20 to 40, with different looks and personalities. I certainly had a lot of fun dating. Joe's fidelity no longer mattered to me, and she enjoyed the attention of new men. And so it went on intermittently for several years. In normal life, Joe's behavior improved slightly. There were fewer complaints. She knew I would leave if she returned to her old habits, and an uneasy truce was established between us. I spent more and more time with Jade, who, as a teenager, often fought with her mom, while I quietly strengthened the bonds we had in the meantime. I appreciated it all the more because I was well aware of how easily it could all end. It was definitely cheaper to keep her. If we broke up, I doubt I could afford to have my own property, and on top of that, I would have to do all the shopping, cooking, and cleaning, and actually pay Joe to sleep with Richard Askew. Moreover, I had intimate relationships with many attractive women that I would never have approached as a single guy. I would have preferred fidelity and a monogamous relationship, but this seemed like the best way out for me. I no longer loved Joe the way I used to, but our relationship was good enough. Although I had begun to miss the deep connection I had with someone special, Joe was no longer that person for me. Jade was already 13, and I just needed to get through a few more years. I then began to connect with a couple in their early 30s named Megan and Ian. The communication was comfortable and friendly, and we ended up exchanging a few pictures of us in our clothes. The couple was amazing. Megan is elegant and very pretty with curly red hair, and Ian looked quite trim. Ian was friendly and interesting, and Megan was rather quiet, perhaps a little shy, and certainly not the kind of hardened swingers I expected to see. We agreed to meet at the restaurant and see how things went. Joe had prepared herself by wearing a tight little black dress that showed off her figure. I was somewhat surprised at the choice of outfit, and assumed it was rather revealing. She, however, insisted that she wanted to look proper, and that she needed high-heeled shoes as Ian was very tall. We walked into the upmarket bar and saw them in a quiet booth. They smiled, said hello like old friends, and hugged. Ian was dressed in a suit as nice as my jeans and shirt. Seeing Megan in person took my breath away. The computer screen didn't do justice to her beauty. She was wearing a midnight blue dress that seemed to shimmer in the light of the street lamps, not too revealing, and medium heels. Her chalky red hair was a mass of curls and bobby pins, but it looked perfectly natural. Maybe Joe was right about the outfit. Lots of smiles and confirmation that we were happy to finally meet. We exchanged a few initial small talk about how we found the place. We ordered a couple bottles of wine, and while I tried not to look at Megan too obviously, Ian was looking at Joe more candidly. The conversation continued, with everyone confessing that they'd barely thought about anything else all week. I can't believe we're getting along so well. Everything is more casual than I thought it would be. It feels like we've been friends for a long time. The last thing we need is for you guys to get worked up. The others agreed with my comment. I saw the way Joe was looking at Ian. If anyone didn't like this state of affairs, she seemed fascinated by him, and it didn't take long before she went into full flirtation mode. Megan bit her lip. It was a nervous gesture, but it drew my attention to her rather full lips. There was a dance floor with music playing between the bar and the restaurant, and I asked Megan if she wanted to dance. She looked at Ian, who nodded in agreement. At the same time, he stood up and held out his hand to Joe. She smiled and took it without even looking in my direction. I remember our first touch very well, when Megan took my hand and I looked into her eyes. My heart jumped slightly as it did in my groin. With my other hand, I put my arm around her waist. "Is everything okay?" Megan only smiled and nodded back as we started to move slowly to the music. I could see she was nervous, so I continued to chat. "By the way, I like your dress. It's very elegant." "Thank you. I was hoping you'd like it. It took me a whole damn eternity to choose. I was aiming for sexy, not slutty and all that." "Well, I'd say you pulled it off. You look elegant and classy." Megan surprised me by explaining that this was the first time they had met like this. Their interest was sparked after meeting up with old college friends, lots of alcohol, which led to a fling, but they didn't follow through. Ian wanted to explore and experiment and convinced Megan to give it a try. I sensed there was something more behind it, but didn't want to pry too much and too soon. "Would you mind if I pulled you close to me, Megan?" "No, and you can call me Meg, everyone else does." "Okay, why don't you put your hands on my shoulders?" When she did, I ran my hands around her petite waist. "How does that feel?" "It feels good, Phil. I like being around you." I bit my lip again. "Just try to relax, Meg. I'm not going to do anything that will make you uncomfortable. Tell me if I do, and we'll work it out." "Thanks, Phil. That means a lot. I want to trust you, and this is a great way to start something special, I hope." I hugged her and forgot about Joe and Ian for a while. Lost in the moment, I wanted to kiss her, but I resisted the urge. I thought it was too soon, and I hoped it would be something to look forward to. We looked over and saw that Ian and Joe were kissing. His hands were also a little lower. I was amazed at how little I cared. After her cheating, I never felt the same, and even if we could have recovered from that, her attitude precluded that possibility. Meg raised her eyes to me. "What do you feel when you see them kissing?" I expected to feel jealousy, but no, I think it's because I have you in my arms. Meg smiled back. "You're too cute." That's probably the thing that's been bothering me the most all week. I never doubted that I liked you, but I thought the jealousy might become overwhelming, but it hasn't. It's like a normal date, which I like, but with an extra note of excitement. More than just exciting, it's the same for me. I don't mind since we're together. I pulled her a little closer to me, enjoying the closeness of her body, and let my hands slide to the back of her thighs, trying to avoid grabbing her ass and feeling her breasts meet my breasts as we continued to almost dance. Ian and Joe slid over to us. "Are you guys doing okay?" I let Meg answer. "Yeah, we're fine." "You guys make a great couple." I felt proud when Ian said that. For some reason, I really like being called a couple. Meg turned to me. "I couldn't agree more. I think so too." We sat back down in the booth while Ian and Joe continued to dance. I leaned over to chat to her over the music. Our faces were naturally close. She leaned over and kissed me gently. Her lips were so soft and her perfume was intoxicating. The sensation was electric, like a first high school kiss, exciting and nerve-wracking. Meg moaned softly, and I continued the kiss, not caring where we were. I loved her gentle responses and the sensations they evoked. I became more and more passionate and pulled her to me, not caring where we were and unable to stop. My mouth opened fully. Her taste was so sweet and hot, I moaned. Eventually, we broke the kiss, both of us panting, her breasts beating against me, and I was completely tense. Wow, this is so special. Thank you. I'm serious. There's no rush. We can move at a pace you're comfortable with. We don't have to follow. I know. We'll just do our own thing. We looked over and saw Joe looking at us, and Ian mouthed, "Wow." Meg looked up at him and blushed, pressing her face against my chest. I heard a muffled, "I guess they saw the whole thing." "I guess so. We were a little slow on the uptake. Do you feel bad about that?" "No, do you?" "Not a bit, and I don't want to let you go." Ian and Joe joined us, and we continued talking about friends, family, traveling, and work. Time flew by, confirming that we had a lot in common and connected. Ian interrupted the hesitation. "Do you guys want to have a nightcap at our place, or can we do it another time if it seems too rushed?" Joe looked enthusiastic. I looked at Meg, who nodded, biting her lip again, and said, "How about we go back and see how it goes? No promises?" "Yes, fair enough. Any of us can stop at any time," Joe added with a laugh. "Why don't we switch partners for the duration of the trip so no one gets lost?" Sure sounds like a good plan. I offered Meg my hand, she took it, and I led her out of the bar, my stomach churning with excitement and some anxiety. Joe and Ian followed me, holding hands. I noticed the waitress watching us with raised eyebrows and a smile. I got in the car and couldn't resist leaning in to kiss her, wondering if I was going to get her cheek or her lips. She turned and kissed me gently on the lips. Starting the engine, we drove off, seeing that Ian had followed us. "Were you happy with tonight, Meg?" "Yes, it was great. More comfortable than I expected, but that doesn't mean I'm not still scared." "I'd say you shouldn't be scared, but I'm scared myself. You're very attractive, and I enjoy your company. Just remember that you have everything under control." She giggled and reached up to squeeze my hand. "I like that. Thank you. You make it easy. I had so many doubts. I think Ian and Joe got along too." After a short drive, we arrived and walked over to their house, drank some wine at the breakfast bar, and then settled into the living room. I was glad Meg had decided to sit next to me. We talked for a while, and I kept glancing at Meg. She really did have an amazing figure. When I looked over, Ian's hand was on Joe's thigh, and he moved in for a kiss. I decided to do the same with Meg, and started kissing. It wasn't long before Ian led Joe to the exit. "Meet me for breakfast at 9 in the morning. Not just sex, but a sleepover." I was more than pleased at the prospect of spending the night with Meg, and agreed. Meg also nodded in agreement. I started making out with her more and more, unable to stop, and then she started to get some serious mange. "You're obviously a nice guy, but I'm not sure I can do this." I was disappointed, but responded, "It's okay, Meg. You have to be totally comfortable with what we're doing, and you have to be sure it's exactly what you want." Then we heard the unmistakable sound of the bed creaking upstairs and realized what that meant. With those words, Meg took a deep breath, stood up, gave me her hand, and led me upstairs. We were awakened by the sound of the headboard hitting the wall in the next room. Ian and Joe were obviously getting reacquainted. Meg was more than happy to receive the same as Joe. Breakfast turned into casual conversation after the ice was broken. We exchanged views without going into details. Joe and Ian seemed to have a good time too, and we agreed to meet again. Over the next 6 months, we continued to meet up with Ian and Meg, and each meeting I thoroughly enjoyed. Joe started asking if I had feelings for Meg. I denied it, saying it was just a fluke. Eventually, Ian said they wouldn't be seeing us again. He thought Meg and I were too close. I didn't argue, admitting to myself that I had fallen in love, and that if I had the chance, I would switch places with Joe in a heartbeat. But unfortunately, that was the end of it. 4 months had passed since we'd last seen each other, when out of the blue, Joe told me that Ian and Meg had invited us to a party. Apparently, it was a swingers party hosted by a couple they had met online. They weren't sure about it and wanted some friends there in case it got too crowded. We didn't like swinger parties. We agreed that we would only swap with other couples, no groups or singles. But I wanted to see Meg again, so I agreed to go. Joe was very interested in the idea, adding that she was curious about what such parties entailed and that they could open up new possibilities. I was pleasantly surprised when we entered the hangout spot, which was a large and secluded private home. The party was casual with drinks and meet and greets. The hosts introduced us to some of the regulars, all of whom seemed like nice people, but no Ian or Megan in sight. Joe started chatting to a guy named Jeff. He was young and good-looking and seemed to like her. They made their way to the bar, and I chatted with the hosts and was introduced to another couple. About 20 or 30 minutes had passed when Joe came back and said she was heading upstairs to get to know Jeff better. Wait a second, it's not part of our agreement, remember? He's single and we only exchange with couples. But this is a swingers party. Like hell it is. We're still sticking to our boundaries. I could see she was annoyed and wondered if she could just go anyway, but then I saw her shake her head slightly in the direction of her would-be lover at the other end of the room. By the time Ian and Meg arrived, she had calmed down a bit. I noticed that Meg was wearing a very revealing dress for her, short and with a deep neckline. She looked spectacular, but certainly didn't feel comfortable. Ian was outgoing as usual, but Meg looked depressed and awkward, and I decided that this was a party that was unlikely to be to her or my liking. It wasn't long before Ian led Joe towards the bar again, leaving Meg and me behind. We chatted, but she looked preoccupied. The conversation was strained, lacking the warmth of our previous encounters. Would you like to go out? Just for a ride? No strings attached? Maybe get some fresh air? You could see such relief on her face, and then she burst into tears. I tried to calm her down by asking her what was wrong. Ian wants me to try sex, you know, with more than one guy. I don't want to do it, but Ian is very insistent on it and insisted we come to the party. I only agreed when Ian said you'd be there. I knew you wouldn't want me to do something I didn't feel comfortable with. Wait, that doesn't make sense. Why would Ian invite me knowing I would say no? It hit us both at the same time. Meg spoke up first. Maybe he had something planned for Joe. They were texting to make arrangements. We went to look for them, but they weren't at the bar, and I turned to Meg, shaking my head. Looking at my watch, I realized it had been at least 45 minutes since they had left together. I quickly ran up the stairs and was already moving down the hall when Joe staggered out of the bedroom door, trying to pull on her dress, and we almost collided. The door was open, and I saw Ian and Jeff inside. At least she had the decency to look embarrassed. I stared at her in fury. This is my fault too, Joe. It's my body, and I'll do whatever I want with it. Feel free, but I'm leaving. I turned on my heel, sidestepping Meg on the stairs and headed for the exit. I could hear my heels clicking behind me as I walked down the stairs and across the tiled hallway. I turned to tell Joe exactly where she could go, but saw Meg looking back at me. She was panicked. Her eyes widened. Can I come with you? I looked up the landing and saw a third man with two others leading the way to Joe's bedroom. I nodded to Meg and turned to leave. The ride was uneventful. We talked a bit about what we were going to do and came to the conclusion that both Ian and Joe were narcissistic assholes. In my case, I thought Joe would always try to win and would not accept any balance in our relationship. Meg's assessment was more harsh. Ian is just an asshole. That made me laugh. Just the right level of personality analysis that I could understand, and for which I didn't need a counselor. Can I take you home? I'm not really in the mood for company. Only if you alone are okay, and if you take me to my mom's. I don't want to see Ian anytime soon. I left her, promising to be in touch, and went back into the house alone, acutely aware of the silence and darkness. Joe came home the next day. I didn't know if she would try to argue or apologize. Don't even bother, Joe. It's over between us. Why? It's just sex. We've slept with dozens of people. What's the difference? I've had enough. 3 guys and a whole night out. You seem to be saying that you can always get more. By the way, you're right about that. You're attractive. A lot of men want you. You've won. Congratulations. She seemed to be barely holding back a smile. Have you slept without a condom yet? I need you to be honest. No, this is a first. I'm sorry I got upset because you ruined my fun with Jeff. Bullshit. You and Ian set it up. Used Megan to distract me while you both got what you wanted. It's always the same with you. You're like a spoiled brat and it's never enough. You need to go to the clinic and get checked out. I won't touch you again. Joe didn't take my leaving very well. She started stalking me and wouldn't let me see Jade. At one point, she tried to force her way into my parents' house where I was staying, ranting about how I was mistreating her. I tried to kick her out without using force. Thankfully, my mom showed no restraint. She slapped her and literally threw her out, adding, "You need help, Joe. I'm not sure you're healthy." This remark triggered another barrage of abusive language from Joe. I was giving Joe money for Jade, but she referred me to the child support agency. I couldn't keep from laughing when they told me there that I should pay her less, and she got so angry that she threatened the administrator and got a warning from the police. I went to get Jade, but Joe said she was at her girlfriend's. I was stunned to see Richard Askew walk in from the living room, unperturbed as a cucumber. What the hell? Like I said, if you leave me, Richard will fuck me over, and here he is. Soon he'll be taking me upstairs. I turned to Richard, who had a smug expression on his face. I was definitely going to beat the shit out of him. And then I remembered Dr. Taylor's warning from years ago. Maybe it was a setup, a trap. Joe hated losing at anything, and if I got arrested for assault, Joe would keep Jade as well as anything else. Of course, she wouldn't go that far. Would she? Joe continued. I'm sure Richard would make a wonderful father for Jade. He would be only too happy to adopt her. I finally noticed that her phone, partially hidden on the shelf, was undoubtedly recording. I laughed, almost hysterically. Nice try, Joe, but I won't touch a single hair on his rich little head. You're a piece of work, and you both really deserve each other. By the way, does Richard know you've slept with several guys at once and without protection? Richard almost choked. Walking out, I added carelessly, Better sign up for a sexual disease clinic, buddy. You don't want anything eating away at you. While Joe was having sex, I received a number of abusive messages and videos. Her comments were quite enlightening. I found it odd that she was wasting time texting if she was doing so well, and I didn't care anymore, just as long as Jade was safe. If you give me Jade, you'll have more time to sleep with whoever you want. Although I hear Richard has moved out, so you've got some room to spare, so to speak. At this, she hung up, no doubt stunned that already 2 men had rejected her. The divorce was a nightmare. It dragged on and on. She kept fighting back and making up nonsense about me having affairs and being abusive. She had no evidence, and some of the claims were so ridiculous that the family court, social workers, and attorneys began to realize what she was. Anyone who disagreed with her received a barrage of insults. I realized that the Joe I was living with was just a simplified version of her. Even Joe's parents became concerned because of their princess's erratic behavior, but it was my fault too, for I was the one who had abandoned her. Now, at 14, Jade had no choice, but the family court listened to her wishes and she wanted to stay with me. I continued to do most of the parenting duties, never missing an event, class, or parent-teacher meeting, and turned into a teen cab service. Joe saw this choice as a betrayal. After all, how could you not choose her? At the custody determination hearing, she lost her temper when my attorney asked for a psychological evaluation of Joe to ensure Jade's safety. I thought Joe was going to explode. She started swearing right in the middle of court and completely lost her temper. She thought I was a bastard, and so did my attorney. To be fair, she may be right, but he was on my side after all. She was again held in contempt of court when she continued to cause problems with my access to Jade. I kept a log and had a chain of her messages as evidence. The judge warned her that one more such incident, and she would be remanded into custody. At the last hearing, she lost her temper again when the judge confirmed joint custody and called him a misguided old fart. She was prosecuted and fined for that outburst. As time went on, I spent more and more time with Jade. Joe seemed to lose interest in parenting and Jade's bad behavior, although I observed nothing of the sort. All I had to do was pay another 18 months on the mortgage, and then we could sell the house or Joe would have to buy out my share. Another thing I had done was to set aside small amounts of money over the years, and that helped a lot. The day after receiving the divorce confirmation, my doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw a red-headed vision. "Hi. I guess you're not interested in dating a recently divorced and reformed swinger who only wants one thing, to settle down with a proper and strictly monogamous man? I think we have someone who fits that description if you want in." The truth was that I kept in touch with Meg, and during our divorces we supported each other. Ian seemed to be on the same path as Joe, and like Joe, would periodically apologize and then revert to his previous behavior. I hardly saw Joe after that, only glimpsed at Jade's 16th birthday party. I thought we might have a reasonable conversation after such a long separation. "I'd consider coming back to you, Phil, if you begged. You know I'm the best thing you ever had. Don't even try to tell me you don't miss me." Walking away, I replied, "You're right, Joe. It would be completely pointless to tell you that." The next time I saw her was at the train station when we were seeing Jade off to university. I was there with Meg. As the train was pulling away, I heard Joe say to her, "I could steal him away from you if I really wanted to, but I like all the other men too much and his ego can't handle it." Meg smiled sweetly. "Oh dear, you really are very embittered and completely detached from reality, aren't you?" Meg turned and took my hand, and we led the stroller away. Jade came back to Meg and me for all the vacations, partly because she doted on her half-brother, and we actually lived happily ever after.